Let me just mention generally the halachic background. As a general rule, autopsies are absolutely usher al pi halacha, and there's a number of reasons why it's usher. Number one, it's usher because it is called nivul hames. Nivul hames is disfiguring of a corpse. You're cutting into a dead body, removing burial parts. That is called bizoyon, degradation of a dead body. That is called nivul, disfigurement of a dead body. So that's one reason that it's usher. And this is a lo saseh d'oraisa, because the Torah says even when somebody is executed for a sin and you hang up his body for a little bit so people can see it, you have to take it down right away, because that's called a bizoyon of that which is in the tselem elokim, and kal v'chomer actually cutting up. So that's one problem. The other problem is there is a chiyuv d'oraisa of kavura, of burial, every part of a body that you're able to bury, you're mechuyev to bury. So the parts of autopsies are typically not returned to the body. So there are two different problems, at least. There is nivul hames, and there is the chiyuv d'oraisa of kavura. So as a result, an autopsy is an awful thing. In addition, it is brought down in Kabbalah that the neshama itself suffers tremendously when the body is not brought to a proper kavura. This is also an issue with cremation, similar type of deal. There's a tsar to the neshama mamish. That's why I tell people all the time, they tell me, what do I do? My mother made me swear on her deathbed that I would get her cremated. How can I violate my mother's last request? And I say, always, feel free to violate your mother's last request. She will be very grateful for you in Gan Eden. You're not hurting your mom. You're actually giving your mom a lot of happiness in what you do. Now, here is the thing, though. There is a famous classic tshuva of the Noda B'Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Lando, the great Rav of Prague of the 1700s, where he writes, there's a very big Aveira called Nivul Hames and the like, but it's not one of the big three. It's not Avodah Zorah, Gila Raya, Shvichus Damim. So Nivul Hames is permitted b'makom pikuach nefesh in order to save somebody's life that's in jeopardy. Right? So theoretically, autopsies are permitted if they have a potential life-saving benefit. But here's the Noda B'Yehuda's chiddush. He says something qualifies as pikuach nefesh only if there is an existing person, a chola, lefanenu, in front of us, meaning in his day it meant in the geographical location. Today it could be worldwide, but there has to be a chola lefanenu who might benefit. Meaning, he is mechalek between an autopsy that can directly help a person in a life-threatening condition versus an autopsy that is part of long-term medical research that maybe, together with a million other autopsies, might save somebody in 20 years. It is very, very rare that an autopsy, I'll give you an example, but that an autopsy can actually be used to save a person. Now, this might be a heter for organ donation. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. Meaning organ donation, meaning the heart will go to somebody. Okay? But stam autopsies, which just yield general medical information, generally do not qualify for pikuach nefesh. And the Noda B'Yehuda points out, because if you're going to say anything that in the long term could save a life is called pikuach nefesh, then you might as well get rid of the whole Torah. I mean, imagine a medical student. You're a frum guy in medical school. So you say, well, gee, I got to drive to this lecture on Shabbos because maybe I'll hear something about preventing a heart attack that may help me 5 years from now, right? Or I got to eat this ham sandwich because if I'm too tired to hear the lecture, I'm not going to be able to save a life, right? There has to be an immediate situation here. That's called chola lefanenu. So as a result, general medical autopsies are absolutely not permitted, even if there's a potential, which is usually slight anyway, that will yield some life-saving information for the future. Now, one interesting example where autopsies might be permitted, although we would discourage it, is what is called a forensic autopsy. Let's assume, for example, that somebody died of foul play, poison, murder. And through the autopsy, we would be able to get evidence that may help to apprehend the murderer. So the poskim say, since people who murder are likely to murder again, although you can actually question that, but that's the assumption, they're like rodfim. So therefore, getting information that can get this guy off the street is called pikuach nefesh. So those types of autopsies would be permitted because they could yield concrete, even though you don't know for sure, obviously you don't know for sure, but it could yield concrete evidence that could get a dangerous person out of commission. So that would fall under the category of pikuach nefesh. And even then, even when the autopsy is permitted, there is an inyan to try to retrieve whatever body parts you can and then put them in the kever along with the rest of the person's body. So the general position of halacha is that we are very, very, very much against autopsies, more or less for the same reason we're against cremations, because it's a bizayon hames. Now, one other thing, it is important to understand something about bizayon hames. You know, the Egyptians had a whole culture that almost worshipped death. Now, people sometimes say, oh, you know, don't speak evil about the dead, meaning when the guy's alive, I could say whatever I want to say about him. When he's dead, it's sacrosanct. Judaism proceeds on the opposite premise. You have to understand something. The reason why we have so many laws about kavod for dead bodies is not because a dead body is more worthy of kavod than a live person. It's the other way around. Since the dead body is like the mantle of a Sefer Torah, since it once housed the divine soul, we must show it kavod. So kal v'chomer, how much kavod you must have for a live person. It's not that you honor the dead more than the living. It's the kavod of the dead is because it once was living. And therefore you have to learn from kavod hames, the inyan of kavod habriyos, b'derech klal. So it's absolutely the opposite of the death worship of the Egyptian culture.